The dim emergency lights cast an eerie red glow through the abandoned medical station's corridors. Dr. James Miller walked carefully through the debris, his medical scanner beeping softly as it searched for signs of life. After 15 years as a frontier medic, he thought he'd seen everything the galaxy had to offer. He was wrong. The distress signal had been weak, barely detectable above the background radiation of this remote sector. Most ships would have ignored it, written it off as instrument noise. But James wasn't most people. His small medical transport, the Healing Hand, was perhaps the only hope for anyone stranded this far from civilized space. Life signs detected, his scanner chirped. Caution, unknown species. James adjusted his breathing mask and followed the signal. The station's life support was failing, and the air was growing thin. Whatever, or whoever, had sent that distress call wouldn't survive much longer in these conditions. The signal led him to what appeared to be a storage closet. The door was sealed, but a small panel nearby still glowed with power. James interfaced his medical tablet with the panel, and after a few tense moments, the door slid open with a hiss. Inside, curled up in the corner, was a creature unlike any he'd seen before. Her skin was a pale lavender color, with delicate patterns that seemed to shimmer in the emergency lighting. Two pairs of eyes, both shut tight, dominated her face, and what looked like fine, crystalline filaments grew from her head instead of hair. She couldn't have been more than the equivalent of a teenage human. The alien girl was clearly unconscious, but his scanner showed she was alive, barely. Her body temperature was dangerously low, and her vital signs were erratic. Most concerning was the obvious sign of infection spreading from a wound on her shoulder, the flesh around it turning a dark, mottled purple. "Hey there," James said softly, knowing she probably couldn't hear him. "I'm going to help you. You're safe now." He reached out to check her pulse the old-fashioned way, but the moment his gloved hand touched her skin, all four of her eyes snapped open. They were beautiful, swirling pools of silver and gold, but filled with terror. She tried to scramble away, letting out a series of clicking sounds that his translator couldn't process. "Easy, easy." James raised his hands, showing they were empty except for his medical scanner. "I'm a doctor. A healer. I'm here to help." The alien girl's eyes darted around the small space, likely looking for an escape route. But then she winced in pain, her hand going to her infected shoulder. The movement seemed to drain what little energy she had left, and she slumped against the wall. James moved slowly, retrieving a universal translator from his medical kit. He placed it on the floor between them and activated it. "Can you understand me now?" After a moment, the device hummed to life, converting her clicks and chirps into English. "Please, don't hurt." "I won't hurt you," James promised, his voice gentle but firm. "I'm a human medical doctor. I picked up your distress signal. You need treatment, or that infection will spread." She stared at him for a long moment, all four eyes blinking independently. Finally, she spoke again, her translated voice barely a whisper. "The others, they said humans were savages. Cruel. But you came. Well, others aren't always right, are they?" James smiled behind his breathing mask. "I'm Dr. Miller, but you can call me James. Can you tell me your name?" "Lily," she responded, using what must have been a rough approximation of her actual name that the translator could handle. "I chose it, from your planet's flowers, when I studied." Her voice trailed off as another wave of pain hit her. James could see her condition deteriorating rapidly. The infection was spreading faster than he'd initially thought, likely accelerated by her weakened state. "Lily, I need to get you to my ship. I have proper medical equipment there. Will you let me help you?" She looked at him again, and James could see the internal struggle in those alien eyes. Trust a strange human, or die here alone in this abandoned station? Finally, she gave what appeared to be a nod. "Yes, please help." As James carefully lifted her frail form, he realized this was just the beginning. The infection wasn't her only problem. She was malnourished, dehydrated, and showing signs of psychological trauma. Someone had left this girl here to die, and he intended to find out why. But first, he had to save her life. The medical bay of the Healing Hand hummed with activity as Dr. James Miller worked tirelessly to save his patient's life. Lily lay unconscious on the treatment bed, her lavender skin pale and clammy under the bright medical lights. The ship's advanced diagnostic system had confirmed his worst fears. The infection was unlike anything in his database. Come on, James muttered, studying the holographic display of Lily's biological readings. Her anatomy was fascinating, a dual circulatory system, crystalline structures integrated with her nervous system, and organs he couldn't even begin to understand. But right now, that uniqueness was making treatment incredibly challenging. The infection in her shoulder was spreading through both bloodstreams, turning the usually iridescent patterns on her skin into dull, darkened patches. Standard antibiotics might kill her faster than the infection. He needed to think differently. After 4 hours of careful analysis and treatment attempts, James finally had a breakthrough. The crystalline filaments on Lily's head weren't just decorative, they seemed to resonate at specific frequencies. When he passed a medical scanner over them, they responded to certain wavelengths of light. "That's it," he whispered, quickly adjusting the medical bay's ambient lighting to match the resonant frequency. The crystal filaments began to glow softly, and for the first time since he'd brought her aboard, Lily's vital signs started to stabilize. Working with this new understanding, James synthesized a treatment that combined traditional medicine with targeted light therapy. Slowly but surely, the infection began to retreat. The dark patches on her skin gradually faded, returning to their natural lavender hue. It was nearly 12 hours later when Lily finally regained consciousness. All 4 of her eyes opened slowly, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. This time, there was less fear in them, though confusion remained evident. "Welcome back," James said softly, activating the universal translator. "You gave me quite a scare there." Lily turned to look at him, her crystal filaments catching the light and creating tiny rainbows on the ceiling. I'm alive?" "Very much so," James smiled, checking her latest readings. "Though I have to admit, your biology gave me quite a challenge. I hope you don't mind that I had to learn a lot about your species' physiology rather quickly." Lily's upper eyes widened while her lower ones narrowed, an expression James couldn't quite interpret. No one has ever bothered to learn. They just said we were too different. Too difficult to treat. "Different isn't difficult," James replied, pulling up a chair beside her bed. "It's just different. Though I would like to know more about what happened to you. The infection you had, it wasn't natural. It looked engineered." Lily's filaments dulled slightly, and she turned away from him. They used us. For experiments. Said they needed to understand how we worked." Her voice became so quiet that the translator barely picked it up. "When the results weren't what they wanted, they left us behind. I was the only one who made it to the escape pods." James felt his hands clench involuntarily. In 15 years of frontier medicine, he'd seen his share of atrocities, but deliberately infecting sentient beings for research? That was a special kind of evil. "You're safe now," he assured her, forcing his voice to remain calm. "No one's going to experiment on you again. But Lily, I need to know, are there others? Other stations where your people are being held?" Before she could answer, the ship's proximity alarm blared to life. James rushed to the medical bay's control panel and pulled up the external sensors. A large vessel had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel nearby. Its design was unfamiliar, but the way it was moving suggested it was scanning the sector systematically. "They're looking for me," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "They always look for escapees. They they can't let anyone know what they did to us." James looked at the scared alien girl on his treatment bed, then back at the scanning ship. He had a choice to make, and he had to make it fast. Dr. James Miller had exactly 2 minutes to make a decision before the scanning ship would detect the healing hand. He looked at his medical displays, then at Lily, whose crystal filaments had dulled to an almost ghostly white with fear. "Can you walk?" he asked, already gathering essential medical supplies. Lily tried to sit up but immediately fell back, her 4 eyes squeezing shut in pain. Not yet. Then we do this the hard way." James quickly began disconnecting monitoring equipment. "I need you to trust me completely for the next few minutes. Can you do that?" She gave him what he'd learned was her species' version of a nod, a slight wave of her crystal filaments. James didn't waste any time. He activated the ship's emergency protocols, triggering a series of pre-programmed actions he'd hoped he'd never need to use. "Computer, initiate Protocol Ghost," he commanded. The lights in the medical bay dimmed, and a low hum filled the ship as hidden systems came online. Being a frontier medic meant sometimes having to hide from pirates or worse, and James had prepared for such situations. He carefully lifted Lily from the medical bed, trying to ignore her quiet whimper of pain. "I'm sorry, but we need to move fast." He carried her through the dimly lit corridors to a hidden compartment behind his personal quarters, a secret medical bay equipped with the most advanced stealth technology he could afford. The scanning ship was getting closer. James's ship computer announced they had 45 seconds until scan contact. "This next part might feel strange," he warned Lily as he placed her on the hidden bay's medical bed. He activated a specialized shield around the compartment, technology that was probably not entirely legal, but had saved more than a few lives over the years. 30 seconds to scan contact, the computer announced. James rushed back to the main medical bay, quickly arranging the bed to look recently used. He pulled up his medical logs and, with a few quick commands, altered them to show he'd recently treated a human mining accident victim who had been transferred to a larger medical facility. 15 seconds. He grabbed a hypospray and injected himself with a mild sedative. His hands needed to shake just the right amount for this to be believable. 5 seconds. James sat down heavily in his office chair, letting the sedative take effect. When the scanning ship's hail came through, he was ready. The view screen flickered to life, showing a stern-faced alien in a military uniform. The species was unfamiliar to James, but the universal translator handled the communication. "Medical transport vessel, this is the research security ship Eternal Progress. You are in a restricted zone. State your purpose." James let his words slur slightly, as if exhausted from a long medical procedure. "Dr. James Miller of the Healing Hand. Just finished treating a plasma burn victim from the mining operation in Sector 7. Had to stabilize them for transport to Central Medical." He gestured tiredly at his altered logs. "Everything's documented if you need to verify." The alien officer's eyes narrowed as they studied both James and the transmitted logs. "Our scans detect no other life signs aboard your vessel." "That's correct," James nodded, letting his head bob a bit too much. "Patient transfer was completed 6 hours ago. I'm just running system cleaning protocols before heading back to my regular patrol route." He yawned widely. "Sorry, been a long shift." There was a long pause as the officer consulted something off-screen. James's heart pounded, but the sedative kept his external appearance calm and slightly dazed. "Your documentation appears in order, Doctor," the officer finally said. "However, if you encounter any unusual patients or distress signals in this sector, you are required to report them immediately to research security." Of course, James mumbled. "Though honestly, I try to avoid unusual cases. Give me simple mining accidents any day. Much easier to treat." The communication ended, and James waited, barely breathing, as the scanning ship continued its sweep of the sector. It was 15 tense minutes before the vessel finally jumped back into faster-than-light travel. Only then did James allow himself to slump in his chair, the sedative making the room spin slightly. He'd bought them some time, but he knew this was far from over. He needed answers, and Lily was the only one who could provide them. But first, he had to sleep off the sedative. As his eyes grew heavy, he set the ship's computer to alert him of any approaching vessels. Sometimes, he reflected as consciousness faded, the best thing a doctor could do was buy their patient time to heal, one way or another. When James woke up 4 hours later, his head was pounding from the sedative's after-effects. He made his way to the hidden medical bay, fighting off dizziness with each step. The sight that greeted him there made him forget his discomfort entirely. Lily was awake, sitting up in bed, and her crystal filaments were glowing with a soft, gentle light that filled the small space. The infection marks on her shoulder had faded to barely visible spots, and her 4 eyes were clear and alert. She was studying the medical displays around her bed with obvious interest. "You understand those readings?" James asked, checking her vital signs out of habit. "Some," she replied through the translator. "My people, we were healers once. Before they found us." Her filaments dimmed slightly. "That's why they wanted us. Our natural ability to manipulate biological energy fields made us perfect test subjects for their weapons program." James pulled up a chair, his professional curiosity warring with his growing anger at what had been done to her. "The infection they gave you, it was a biological weapon?" Lily's lower eyes closed in what he now recognized as a gesture of pain or sadness. "They called it Project Echo. They wanted to create diseases that could target specific species. My people, our healing abilities made us resistant to most diseases. They thought if they could break through our defenses, they could break through anyone's," James finished, feeling sick. "But why?" "The major galactic treaties ban biological weapons research." "Money," Lily said simply. "There are always buyers for weapons that can't be traced. Diseases that look natural." Her filaments rippled with what might have been anger. "They took 50 of my people. Called us volunteers. I was the youngest, they thought I would be the weakest." James checked the ship's long-range scanners before continuing. "They were still clear. How did you escape?" "They made a mistake." Lily's upper eyes narrowed in what might have been satisfaction. "They didn't understand how our healing abilities truly work. We don't just heal ourselves, we can share strength, combine our abilities. The others, they gave their remaining energy to me. Created a distraction. Told me to run, to tell someone what was happening." She reached up to touch her crystal filaments, which dimmed to almost darkness. "I can still feel them sometimes. Their last thoughts, their hope that someone would listen. But I was so weak when I reached the medical station. I thought I would die there, that I had failed them." James sat in silence for a moment, processing everything. "The ship that scanned us, they're not just looking for you, are they? They're making sure no other test subjects escaped." "Yes," Lily confirmed. "And they're preparing for the next phase. I saw the plans before I escaped. They're ready to start testing on other species. They have buyers waiting." Her voice became urgent. "We have to stop them. My people's sacrifice, it can't be for nothing." James stood up and began checking his medical supplies. "We will. But first, we need proof. No one's going to take the word of a frontier medic and an escaped test subject without evidence." He turned to face her. "Those patterns the infection left on your shoulder, they're not just marks, are they? They're data." Lily's filaments brightened slightly. "You noticed?" "Yes. Their arrogance made them sloppy. Every test, every procedure was encoded into the infection itself. They thought no one would be able to read it, let alone survive long enough to share the information. But they didn't count on finding someone who could both treat the infection and document its patterns, James said, already setting up his most detailed scanning equipment. We're going to need help, though. Taking down an illegal weapons research program isn't exactly in my usual job description. You would really help? Lily asked, her voice small. Even knowing how dangerous they are? James gave her a grim smile. I took an oath to help people and prevent harm. Sometimes that means treating injuries. Sometimes it means making sure those injuries never happen in the first place. He began calibrating his scanners. Besides, I know some people who are very interested in stopping illegal weapons research. People who can make sure this never happens to anyone else. But as he worked, James couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Somewhere out there, Project Echo was moving forward, and its creators wouldn't stop looking for their escaped test subject. The next 12 hours aboard the Healing Hand were a blur of activity. James had converted the hidden medical bay into a makeshift laboratory, its surfaces covered with holographic displays showing the complex patterns extracted from Lily's healing shoulder. Her crystal filaments cast dancing shadows on the walls as she helped interpret the data. There, she said, pointing to a particularly dense cluster of markings. That's their primary research facility. The infection patterns contain coordinates, they encoded everything, thinking no one would survive to read them. James studied the location data. That's deep in the outer rim. No wonder they've managed to keep this hidden. He pulled up a star chart, marking the position. The facility's in an asteroid belt. Perfect cover, sensors would just read it as another piece of space rock. And the perfect prison, Lily added, her 4 eyes focused on the display. Even if someone escaped the facility itself, where would they go? The nearest habitable system is days away at full speed. James nodded grimly. Which is why they didn't expect anyone to find you at that abandoned medical station. They probably assumed. He trailed off, not wanting to finish the thought. That I would die there, Lily finished for him. Her filaments pulsed with a determined light. But they were wrong. And now their arrogance will be their downfall. The ship's computer chimed, indicating it had finished analyzing the last set of infection patterns. James reviewed the results, his expression hardening. The weapon designs are even worse than we thought. They're not just targeting specific species, they're designing viruses that can jump between species while leaving their buyers' preferred races immune. Biological genocide, Lily whispered, her filaments dulling to a deep blue. They could wipe out entire civilizations while making it look like a natural pandemic. She turned all 4 eyes to James. How can we stop them? Even with this evidence, they're powerful. Connected. They'll have ways to silence us. James smiled, though there was no humor in it. That's why we're not going to the authorities, not directly. He pulled up a communications interface, his fingers hovering over the controls. Remember when I said I knew people interested in stopping weapons research? Well, I wasn't always just a frontier medic. He began typing rapidly, encoding the message with layers of security protocols that seemed far too advanced for a simple doctor. Before I chose this life, I worked with an organization dedicated to preventing exactly this kind of atrocity. We called ourselves the Medical Ethics Enforcement Division, MEED for short. I've never heard of them, Lily said, watching him work. That's the point. We operate in the shadows, gathering evidence, stopping illegal medical research, rescuing test subjects. He paused, looking at her. It's why I have all this equipment, these hidden systems. I never officially left MEED, just became what we call a sleeper agent. Watching, waiting, ready to act when needed. Lily's filaments brightened with understanding. The protocols you used to hide me from the scanning ship. Standard MEED equipment. We've learned a lot about hiding from people who don't want their secrets exposed. He finished the message and sent it. Now we wait. My old team will need time to mobilize, to put the pieces in place. How long? A day, maybe 2. We'll need to keep moving, stay ahead of the search parties. He checked their fuel reserves. I know some places we can hide, routes they won't expect us to take. Suddenly, Lily reached out and grabbed his arm. Her touch was surprisingly warm, and he could feel a slight tingling sensation, the biological energy field she had mentioned earlier. Thank you, she said softly. Not just for saving my life, but for believing me. For being willing to help stop them. James covered her hand with his own. It's what humans do, or at least, what we should do. Stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. He turned back to the displays. Now, let's make sure we have every bit of evidence ready. When MEED moves, they'll move fast, and we need to be prepared. But as they worked, a warning light began flashing on the ship's long-range scanner. Multiple vessels had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel in a search pattern. The hunters were closing in, and they were running out of time. 6 ships, James announced, studying the tactical display. They're spreading out in a standard search grid. No way to slip through without at least one of them detecting us. His fingers flew over the controls, plotting and discarding possible escape routes. Lily stood beside him in the cockpit, her crystal filaments pulsing with nervous energy. She had insisted on leaving the medical bay, saying she needed to help. Despite his concerns about her health, James had to admit having another set of eyes, or in her case, 2 sets, on their situation was useful. What about there? She pointed to a dense cluster of asteroids. The mineral content would mask our energy signature. Good thinking, but too obvious. They'll expect us to hide there. James zoomed out the display, showing a larger view of the sector. We need something they won't expect. Something. He trailed off, his eyes fixing on a particular point on the map. Lily followed his gaze. The radiation storm? But that's suicide. A massive cloud of space radiation filled one quadrant of their sector, its swirling patterns clearly visible even on the long-range sensors. Most ships avoided such phenomena at all costs. The radiation could fry sensitive equipment and kill unshielded crew members in minutes. Not with the right preparation. James was already moving, heading to the ship's engineering section. Help me modify the shields. Your people's ability to manipulate biological energy, can it be extended to other energy types? Understanding dawned in all 4 of Lily's eyes. Yes. We used to help maintain our colony's power systems. But her filaments dulled slightly. I'm not fully recovered. I don't know if I'm strong enough. You don't have to be, James said, pulling out equipment. The shields just need to hold for about 10 minutes. That's how long it'll take us to get through the edge of the storm. If we time it right, we can use the radiation to mask our jump to faster-than-light speed. They worked quickly, James connecting medical equipment to the shield generators while Lily used her abilities to attune the energy frequencies. It was a crazy plan, exactly the kind of thing no sane pilot would attempt, which was precisely why it might work. The pursuing ships were getting closer. The ship's computer counted down the minutes until they would be in scanner range. Ready? James asked, his hand on the main controls. Lily placed her hands on the modified shield generator, her crystal filaments beginning to glow brighter than James had ever seen them. Ready. James fired up the engines and aimed straight for the radiation storm. Behind them, alert signals indicated the search vessels had spotted them. Commands to halt and prepare for boarding blared over the communication system. Here we go, James muttered, pushing the engines to full power. The healing hand shot forward, heading straight into the deadly radiation cloud. The effect was immediate. Warning alarms screamed through the ship as radiation levels spiked. The shields flickered, struggling to adapt. Lily's face was locked in concentration, her filaments pulsing in time with the shield harmonics. "Hold on," James encouraged, both to Lily and the ship. The pursuing vessels had pulled back, clearly not willing to follow them into the storm. But they were maintaining position, waiting to see if their prey would survive the foolhardy gambit. The ship shuddered violently. System after system reported failing radiation protection. Only the medical bay and critical life support remained fully shielded. Sweat beaded on Lily's face as she fought to maintain the energy balance. 2 minutes to jump point, the computer announced. "They're launching probes after us," Lily reported, her voice strained. "Long-range trackers." "Let them come," James said through gritted teeth as he navigated through the radiation swirls. "The storm will fry their circuitry before they get close." The radiation levels continued to climb. James could feel the heat through the hull, see the static dancing across the displays. But Lily's modifications held, creating a bubble of safety in the heart of the storm. 30 seconds to jump point. The ship groaned, protesting the strain. Warning lights flashed across every console. The probes behind them began to explode one by one as the radiation overwhelmed their systems. 10 seconds. Lily's filaments were blazing now, almost too bright to look at. The shield frequency matched her energy perfectly, creating a harmony of technology and biological power that had never been attempted before. Jump point reached. James slammed the faster-than-light drive to full power, and the healing hand vanished into safety, leaving their pursuers staring helplessly into the heart of the storm. 3 days after their daring escape through the radiation storm, the healing hand drifted in deep space, running silent. James watched through the main viewport as dozens of ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel around them. Unlike the brutal efficiency of the research security vessels, these ships moved with precise coordination. Each one bore the same subtle marking, a medical cross overlaid with a shield. "Meade Strike Fleet," he explained to Lily, who stood beside him watching the ships. "I haven't seen them mobilize in force like this since the synthetic plague incident in the core worlds." Lily's crystal filaments shimmed with anticipation. Her strength had fully returned after their escape, and the last traces of the infection had vanished from her shoulder. But the data patterns remained, preserved by James's careful documentation. "Will it be enough?" she asked, her 4 eyes tracking the movement of the fleet. James nodded. "MEED doesn't move unless they're certain of success. The evidence we provided, the weapon designs, the facility locations, the research data, it was everything they needed. Plus," he smiled grimly, "they have something the researchers never expected." "What's that?" "A witness. You." He turned to face her. "Someone who can testify about what was done, who can prove these weren't just voluntary medical trials like they'll claim. Someone they failed to silence." The main communication system activated, displaying the face of a stern-looking woman with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much. "Dr. Miller," she said, her voice carrying authority earned through years of fighting against medical atrocities. "Strike teams are in position. The facility raids will begin simultaneously in 30 minutes. All research stations, hidden labs, and administrative centers will be hit at once. They won't have time to destroy evidence or evacuate test subjects." "Thank you, Director," James replied. He hesitated, then added, "What about the buyers? The ones waiting for the weapons?" The director's expression hardened. "We found them. Every last one. Turns out your friend's testimony helped us uncover a network that went deeper than anyone suspected. There will be a lot of powerful people facing justice after today." Lily stepped forward. "My people, the other test subjects. Recovery teams are ready," the director assured her. "We have medical ships standing by with specialized equipment. If any of your people survived, we'll find them." She paused, then added more gently, and we'll make sure your people's sacrifice is remembered. This ends today. The next few hours were a blur of coordinated action. James and Lily watched through secure feeds as MED strike teams breached facility after facility. Research data was secured, scientists were arrested, and most importantly, test subjects were freed. Many were in critical condition, but MED's medical teams were ready, having studied the treatment protocols James had developed for Lily. Not all the news was good. Many of Lily's people hadn't survived the experiments. But as reports came in, they discovered something remarkable. In every facility, the surviving test subjects had formed the same kind of energy-sharing networks that had helped Lily escape. They had kept each other alive through their combined healing abilities, waiting for rescue. They never understood, Lily said softly, watching the rescue operations. They thought they could break us, use our abilities for weapons. But our power comes from connection, from helping others. That's something they could never corrupt. James put a hand on her shoulder, feeling the slight tingle of her biological energy field. What will you do now? MED can help relocate you, keep you safe. Actually, Lily turned all four eyes to him, her filaments glowing with determination. I want to help. Like you do. There must be others out there, other victims of illegal experiments who need someone to find them, to help them heal. She gestured at the MED fleet. Your organization, would they accept someone like me? James smiled. MED was founded on the principle that medical knowledge should heal, not harm. That we have a duty to protect those who can't protect themselves. I think. He looked at her glowing filaments, remembering how she had helped modify the shields, how she had refused to give up even when all seemed lost. I think you'll fit right in. The director's voice came over the comm again. Dr. Miller, we're getting reports of similar research facilities in other sectors. Places we never knew about. We could use a frontier medical team that knows how to handle unexpected situations. James looked at Lily, raising an eyebrow in question. Her filaments brightened in response, and all four of her eyes crinkled in what he now recognized as a smile. The healing hand is ready, James replied to the director. Just point us where we're needed. As the ship prepared to jump to its next mission, James realized that what had started as a simple response to a distress call had become something much more. In trying to save one life, they had uncovered a chance to save countless others. And in a galaxy full of darkness, they had found a way to spread a little more light.